Welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera, and we've got a great set of games today. Pretty happy about it. It's always nice to have something to watch on your birthday. Feel old today, but it is what it is. That's the way it is. Hopefully, we get a little bit wiser this year, and we can move on from there. But if you want to give me a present, because I'm going to give you guys a present, I'm going to do a $1 for a week trial of the huddle just down here below. That's what I got for you guys. It's like the goodie bag for coming to the party. So get in there, get all the plays from me, Matty Chucks, That Guy Bets, and Adam's Digest. Got you covered for basically all the sports right now, everything you want, whether it's basketball, NFL for the playoffs. We got hockey in there as well. So be sure to hop in there. Join us for $1. That's my present to you. So that'll be awesome. And if you guys like it, obviously sign up for longer. And again, if you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever you're listening to this on, just be sure to give me a like, give me a subscribe. Helps me out, helps you out, lets me keep producing this good content for you guys. So I'm going to do a quick episode. I want to dive into the Wednesday slate. A couple things are a little bit more notable right now. And one of the biggest storylines that kind of came out was something that isn't a total surprise for us that were listening to Buckets with some of the episodes that we did with the Future Jays. So me, Matt, and Jim Turvey. One of the things that Matt had said was he was like, I think that Jokic is going to be coming back on the shorter end of his time frame from his injury. And I think that that's notable because it sounds like that report just is coming out today from Shams saying that he is going to be returning or trying to return by like the end of January. So that would definitely be on the shorter end of that time frame. Possible, I guess, if he doesn't miss any other games, that he could still win MVP, but definitely something to kind of keep an eye out for. We'll see how many games he misses. But Denver, wild win with the bench beating the Philadelphia 76ers. And we'll have to see how they continue to moving forward. But they're getting Aaron Gordon back. They got Christian Brown back. So, you got two key rotational players there. Jamal Murray's been exceptional out Jokic. Just really kind of picked up the slack there to a degree that he hadn't really ever done before. So really impressive showing from him. And now they get a matchup against the Boston Celtics. So what I'm going to do is here, let's start sharing the screen. Let's get some of the odds up here, and we'll go from there. So if we look at this game, we've got the Denver Nuggets as 9.5-point underdogs to the Boston Celtics. Number of different bets up here. Jaylen Brown, 30.5 points. Derek White, Peyton Pritchard. The line that actually kind of stood out to me, there's a couple, but Luka Garza has been really, really solid for the Boston Celtics, putting up points, getting some rebounds, shooting a couple threes in here too. He didn't shoot any against the Bulls, but 1 for 2, 1 for 1, 2 for 2, 1 for 3, getting some more shots up. He's getting a little bit more minutes too. His minutes have kind of extended here. We're starting to see this climb. We're seeing like mid 20s or so, 20, 23. Pretty impressive for Garza, a player that's kind of struggled to find his footing. But he has played more consistent minutes lately. And if we bump this to maybe 15 plus, we can take a look and see how he's done this season. Really well on this 9.5 points line. He's played between 15 and 27 minutes. He's looking at a 9 of 6, averaging 10.3 points per game, 5.9 rebounds in there. I think in this particular matchup against Denver, if obviously they don't have Jokic, they don't have Jamal or Jonas Valanciunas either, so you're running like a pretty thin rotation. I think Garza is an interesting option here for the Boston Celtics against the Denver Nuggets. Another look that I was looking at is Aaron Gordon. He obviously got hurt in this game here on the 21st against the Rockets, but outside of that game, obviously, like when he's playing any type of meaningful minutes, he's putting up relatively strong numbers, averaging 20.3 points per game, or 20.2 points per game this season. The rebounds are there as well. And that was the spot that kind of drew me in looking at this, because the scoring always a little bit like here or there, but I felt like the rebounding against a relatively undersized Boston squad isn't bad. It's at 4.5 rebounds here. It's pretty juiced though. So I wasn't a super big fan of the assists, but you could always go with 20.5 points plus rebounds. I don't mind that look in this particular spot against the Boston Celtics. Jamal Murray is listed as questionable. Aaron Gordon is questionable. Tim Hardaway Jr., game time decision. Christian Brown, also questionable. So a lot of players on the injury report for the Denver Nuggets still. We'll have to see who is in, who's out. But those were a couple things that I was looking at. Peyton Watson, this points line is great, though. I mean, he's playing a ton of minutes lately. 36 minutes, 40 minutes, 29 minutes, 44 minutes in that overtime win against Philadelphia. 20 points in a row in 4 straight games. So pretty impressive showing for him here without Jokic. And again, he's gone over this line of 14.5 points in all 4 games without Jokic, averaging 23 points per game. So I think Peyton Watson's scoring is something you kind of have to look at, even though this has been a little bit of a tougher matchup for players against the Boston Celtics. All right, so for the next game, I was looking at the Raptors versus the Hornets, and I was drawn to a couple of different plays. First, I was looking at Kneppel over 17.5 points. Dude's just been a monster on this line. 75% of games this season, really over his last 20. Still, 68.6% of games over the course of the entire season, even with adding some of these players in. Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, LaMelo Ball. He had these 2 games that were like really bad here. He's got 2 5s, but he still hit this in 6 of 9 games this season. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong filter for Brandon Miller. With Brandon Miller, he's hit this in 10 of 15 games with all these players, this 17.5 line. I do think that I do have some concerns here. He went over this line in both games against the Raptors here. So I think that this is like relevant, right? And we can actually just take a look and see. He's actually played 3 games against the Raptors. So 24, 20, and 21 points. My concern is this: 56% shooting, fine. 4 of 10 from 3. 4 of 7 from 3, 50% shooting, 100% from the free throw line, overtime. Then we've got another one, 5 of 9 from 3. 7 of 12, 21 points, 32 minutes. I'm not like totally convinced that he is going to get enough volume in this particular spot for a couple different reasons. Number one, if we look at the Raptors' pace and their defense, so I switched over here to dunks and threes for those of you guys watching on YouTube. Toronto is 6th in adjusted defensive rating, and they play at the 23rd pace in the league. The Hornets play at the 25th pace in the league, and their defense obviously sucks, but their offense is, still about mid. So we're kind of looking at the situation where, for Toronto anyway, the defense has been awesome, and they're playing slow. And then the Hornets don't really speed this up either. So I think we could get into a little bit more of a sloggy type of game. Don't love that for props for some of these guys, even though they've hit these lines before. This might be one where I don't really want to fade him, but I might be looking for a spot where maybe I can grab like an under a little bit later on if this bumps up a little bit. Because, I mean, look at this. Even over the last 20, once you start popping this line up a little bit, like this is 17.5, you get to like 19.5, it changes. He's down to like 55% on the hit rate. The play that I was looking at, though, is Colin Sexton over 12.5 points, plus money right now at FanDuel, about even odds everywhere else right now. He's hit this in 16 of his last 20 games and 22 of 28 games this season, even with everybody. I think this is the part that's notable: with LaMelo, with Miles Bridges, with with Brandon Miller. 9 of 11 games, never forget, averaging 15.6 points per game. 18-point game against the Raptors, and he played 33 minutes in that game. He was getting more burn in the overtime. But really, like, the only game misses he's got one miss at 12 against the Wizards, where he only played 16 minutes. And then he's got to miss against the Thunder. So, like, if you're going to miss against anybody, it's probably going to be against the Thunder. And they honestly just crushed in that game. He still scored 10, and his closing line was 10.5. So if we actually look at this versus what his closing line was in all of these games, I think he actually hit his prop in every single game except for this one against the Bulls. His closing line was 13.5. He finished at 13. And then against the Thunder, his closing line was 10.5. So 12.5, I think we're getting a pretty good price here. I understand that the pace is a little bit different, but in terms of what he's able to do, I think that he's just kind of looked at as like a microwave scorer in whatever role he's kind of put in. And 12.5 points is something he can easily get to. Sometimes he shoots threes, but he doesn't need them to kind of be successful. So I think the over 12.5, especially a plus money, is a pretty good look. Looking at the Chicago Bulls versus the Detroit Pistons, you've got Cade Cunningham here. I think it's an interesting spot for him against the Bulls. Looking back, he scored 23 points against them a little bit earlier this season. He's never really scored very well against them for whatever reason. But this is a spot where I would kind of want to look towards his dimes. He had 10 against them on 17 potentials earlier. So that's something that I would definitely be kind of considering anyway. I think that Chicago, they tend to give up a lot of assists. They play at a pretty fast pace. So I think that that's not a bad look here. Looking at their injury report, we already know that Jalen Duren is going to be out for this game. So I think that you could go to, a little bit of B-ball Paul action here. The scoring hasn't always been there without Duren, but the rebounding has been pretty consistent. He's got 8 in all these games and then he's got a 13 rebound game against Chicago. So against Chicago, he put up 28 and 13 against them earlier this season in a game without Jalen Duren. So got to always check and make sure, Isaiah Stewart didn't play in that game. So that's part of the problem too. So, I don't think we can necessarily expect that again, but I do think that there's a little bit of ability there. Looking a little bit further, another player that I'm a little bit interested in here is Asar Thompson, 5.5 rebound line. He's over in all 3 games without Jalen Duren this season. 8, 8, and 7. He's definitely one of the primary beneficiaries of Duren being out. So that's something that I would be looking for in this spot against the against the against the Chicago Bulls. Moving on a little bit, this game against the Clippers, between the Knicks and the Clippers, I think is interesting. There's been some commentary about some stuff regarding Cat, and a little bit of what how happy he is with the situation. I know that we have Josh Hart listed here as out. I usually like to look at the ESPN injury reports. I think this is kind of the fastest way to do so. And when we look at the Knicks, the New York Knicks have listed, obviously Landry Shamet is out. Josh Hart still not there just yet, but going to be soon. I think I saw a tweet that said he could possibly be back for this game, but seems like no dice there. The angle that I'm kind of interested in is looking at this particular spot against the Clippers here. Zubac is back. And when I look at this from a perspective of what Karl Anthony Towns can do, I'm a little bit interested here because I think what Karl can do is he can spread the floor a little bit. And he's had relative success against the Clippers over the past couple of seasons, especially with New York, 23 points, 34 points, 10 and 14 rebounds. I think it's a decent matchup for him against Zoo and against Brook Lopez, both players that are generally playing in a drop. So I would potentially be looking at his threes here. So his threes are at over 1.5 at -150, really juiced line. So I think that there's 3-point upside. And when I look at that and I say, okay, I think there's 3-point upside, I think that also helps with his overall point total at this 20.5. I don't think it's a bad number. He's kind of been inconsistent with this throughout the course of the season, only averaging 23. He's averaging, 21.5, 21.2 points per game this season. It's really the lowest mark he's had in a very long time. So something to kind of keep an eye out for there. In regards to Jalen Brunson, Brunson's always been he's just always awesome, but he hasn't played the Clippers in years, actually. So the last time he played the Clippers was back in December of 2023. Not a lot of data to go off of in terms of what he can and can't do, but I do think that this 28.5-point line is just something that he's obviously able to hit. The one problem with playing the Clippers is that they generally play a little bit slow, but looking at what the shots that they allow these pull-up threes, above the break threes, and they allow shots in the paint, but not necessarily at the rim. And that's kind of where Brunson makes a living. He's taking 31% of shots from above the arc, 27% of his shots from within the paint, but not in the restricted area. So I think that this is a decent matchup for him. And again, these Miles McBride lines have been really, really good. We're seeing, again, a 10.5 points prop here for him. We just hit it last game against the Detroit Pistons, 17 points, 5 of 6 from 3 in that game. And here, again, you've got that good matchup where he's shooting 56% of his shots from above the break. The Clippers are allowing that shot as well. So I don't mind if you wanted to even look at this 2.5 threes at plus money. But honestly, at that point, I really don't mind the 10.5 points, averaging 13.6 points per game over the last over the last season, or over this season anyway. So I think it's a really good spot, really good opportunity for Miles McBride as well. On the flip side, looking at Kawhi Leonard, I was a little annoyed last game because I'd given out Kawhi Leonard under 28.5 points. He went under that line anyway. 24 points against the Warriors. 0 for 8 from 3, still took a shitload of shots, like 25 shots. The problem with the bet wasn't like, I was happy with the bet when I gave it, and I think the analysis was right. But then James Harden got like a late downgrade and was ruled out of this game. The reason I think that this is like important is looking at their injury report. James Harden's listed as day to day. He's questionable for this matchup against the Knicks. If we look at the Clippers' schedule, they play the Knicks today. They play the Brooklyn Nets on Friday. No travel, opportunity to potentially rest Harden in, maybe this quote unquote tougher game against the Knicks, and then play him against the Brooklyn Nets. I'm imagining he's going to want to play in that game due to some of the history, obviously, with Brooklyn. But the reason that this is important is, for me, I wanted to bet this Kawhi Leonard under because of Ivica Zubac returning from injury. Without Zoo, Kawhi's averaging 40.4 points per game in 5 games. 41, 28, 55, 33, 45. With Zoo, he's all the way down to 25 points per game. Only hit this in 6. He's basically only had 30 or more points in 6 of 20 games, right? So that was kind of what I'm looking at for this Kawhi spot. I think that he's somebody that New York has like the right players to kind of throw at him, whether it's Mikal Bridges, whether it's OG Anunoby, a little bit of Miles McBride maybe mixed in, a little bit of Mitchell Robinson. Kawhi is obviously a mismatch on some of those players in certain situations, but it's more about the dynamics of the Clippers offense. And what I mean by that is, for me, James Harden, one of the things that we saw without Zubac was that his assist rate came down precipitously. And in the games without Zoo, he was only averaging 6.2 assists per game, never had more than 7. In the games with Zoo, we see this jump all the way to 8.3. And a lot of that has to do with the pick and roll that they're able to run. And that becomes a much bigger part of the Clippers offense when Harden can run that with Zubac. And without him, I think that it shuffled a lot more of like the offensive load onto Kawhi Leonard. So for me, I think this 29.5 points line is too high still. And I would be looking at an under here. New York does not play at a particularly fast pace. And we can see that here with the Clippers playing at the second slowest pace in the league, the Knicks playing at the 24th pace in the league. So both teams playing pretty slow. The opportunities are a little bit more limited. And the thing is, where New York kind of gets burned is in these spots with like in transition. They have one of the shortest defensive possession lengths in the league. The Clippers don't do that. They just don't really get out in transition. Their offense isn't conducive for doing so. And as a result, I think it makes it much more difficult for guys like Kawhi to kind of run up their point totals. So I'd be looking at that. I know New York's defense has kind of been like really weak lately, but I think that that's definitely a look for you here. And then John Collins has been really good as a scorer, but with Zoo, his rebounding is not particularly strong. And they've got his line here. There's a 5.5 at Fanatics, but that's probably a fake line. And then we've mostly got juiced 4.5s to the over, plus money to the under. He's only averaging, in these last 20 games with Zoo, he's only averaging 4.5 rebounds. New York is an interesting rebound team because you have Mitchell Robinson, you have Karl Anthony Towns. You would think that they should be like a pretty good rebounding team, and they are, but they do tend to allow rebounds to like the forward position. So something to keep an eye on, something to kind of look for. But in his history against the New York Knicks, he's got an 11 rebound game. He's got a 13 rebound game, but both of those were with the Utah Jazz over the past couple of seasons. So something to look out for with John Collins. The Magic play the Nets on Wednesday. No props up just yet, But looking at the game, I can kind of tell you a couple things that I'm interested in. It's back to back for Orlando. I wonder, if maybe they rest anybody. Brooklyn has been an absolute juggernaut defensively. They've been one of the best defenses in the NBA over the past couple of weeks, and really over the course of the season, they've been really strong. Looking at their adjusted defensive rating over the course of the whole season, they're 22nd, but recently they've been a much better defense. So I think it begs the question here when you play Orlando, who has generally struggled a little bit offensively. Who can step up? How can they step up? I think this is a tougher game for overs given the pace and given Brooklyn's recent form. Looking at the Suns versus the Grizzlies, I don't have anything in here just yet, but it's going to be a back-to-back for Memphis. We'll have to see if anybody sits out of that game. Ja Morant didn't play last night, so I'd imagine that he plays in this game against the Phoenix Suns. Looking at the Jazz versus the Thunder, OKC kind of could use a win here. So I'm curious to see exactly how this kind of shakes out. J-Dub has been it's been interesting since his return. They just haven't really gelled 100%. But the play that I was looking at here was I was looking at Cason Wallace over 1.5 steals. So part of why I like this 1.5 steals look is that he's averaging 1.9 steals per game. He's got 2 or more in 12 of his last 20 games. Or really, if we look at this season, it's 12 of 20. Or whatever it is. What's the max? How many games has he played? A lot of games, 36 games. He's had 2 steals in 22 of 36 games. I saw this line at Bet365 at minus 105. I'm going to bet that. Now, the reason I say this is that if we look at this, Utah plays at a pretty fast pace. So we're looking at a favorable situation here. He's had at least 1 steal in all but 1 game this season. So in 10 of 15 games, he's recorded 2 or more steals, and in 14 of 15, he's recorded at least 1 steal. Now, if we keep going a little bit further here, if we looked at the amount of steals that they tend to allow here to his position, we're looking at a little bit more of a favorable matchup here for against Utah. And if we add this filter in, now we're looking at top 10 pace and allowing a ton of steals, and we're at 7 of 9, averaging 2.7 steals per game. I think this is a great opportunity. He had 4 already against the Utah Jazz earlier in the season, and I think this is a great opportunity to kind of pick up on this Cason Wallace steals line, where he's getting this matchup that he's kind of crushed in. Recently, if you looked, he's been a little bit more inconsistent, so I think that this is kind of giving us a little bit more value on the line. So I'm going to grab that over 1.5 steals look. Looking at the Los Angeles Lakers versus the San Antonio Spurs, curious to see if Wemby plays. It's a back-to-back, but he seems to just be dead set on getting to that 65 game limit. So I think that that's interesting here. The Lakers are an absolute sieve defensively. But one of the things that I do think kind of creates some value is they have to list Wemby in the players of, like, especially for like the rebounding stuff. They have to list him as one of the players that could lead the game in rebounding. He obviously does have some of these ceiling games, but I think he's going to be limited to like this 22 minutes line, right? So if we say he's going to play between let's say 15 and 25 minutes, averaging in those games 11.6 rebounds per game. So there's still a lot of potential to go upwards, but I do think it caps his ceiling to a degree. And oh, I'm sorry, I pulled the wrong thing. Let's look at the minutes. If we look at the minutes, like 15 to say 25, he's only played these couple games. 6 minutes or 6 rebounds, 12 rebounds, 13 rebounds. What the fuck? All right, fix it again. Averaging 8.8 rebounds, 4 of 8 this season. On this 8.5 rebounds line when he's playing between 15 and 25 minutes. And I think that's kind of where he's going to be. Lakers are actually pretty good at limiting some of these rebounding opportunities. So I do think that that's something to kind of keep an eye out for because what it does is it opens up some of these leader markets for teams playing them, because they basically are always going to cook in Wemby's ceiling as somebody that can win this type of market or come out on top. But I don't think it's adequately assessing for the floor and like a lot more of the downward trajectory, especially against some of these other teams, because not only does it limit Wemby's upside, I think it also limits like Dylan Harper, limits Stephon Castle, it limits De'Aaron Fox, and most importantly, it limits Luke Cornett's rebounding upside. Wemby's minutes restriction is basically pulling down the numbers on the Spurs, and then it's allowing the other teams who are running more traditional lineups a little bit of a better edge or a better opportunity to kind of put up bigger numbers. So that's one of the things that I would be looking at in this particular spot. Stephon Castle, kind of rough game from a scoring perspective, and honestly, even from an assisting perspective against the Memphis Grizzlies. I would be looking right back to him in this spot against the Lakers. I think it's a great opportunity. He scored 30 points against them earlier in the season, and then 16 in the game prior, earlier in the season against them, 8 and 6 rebounds. That 25.5 points plus assists certainly looks pretty good in this spot. I think Dylan Harper also could potentially have a decent game on the back-to-back if they decide to kind of stretch some of the minutes out. For the Bucks and the Warriors, I was looking at some Curry stuff. He's actually rebounded really well against the Milwaukee Bucks of the past couple of seasons, 6, 6, and 8 over the past couple of years against them from a rebounding spot. So something I was kind of considering. I was also looking. So this is one of the things that I want to say when you're looking at some of these hit rate charts. I think they're always nice to kind of look at. I think they're helpful. But if you look at Giannis's assists have been awesome against the Warriors, 5, 6, and 7 over the past couple of seasons, right? But the problem is, of late, we've seen his assists kind of fall off the floor, in part due to this like minutes restriction that he's somewhat on, right? And we'll pull this up over like some of his injuries. But a lot of this has to do with the Kevin Porter Jr. minutes. And last season, he was really good with Kevin Porter Jr. This season, when we look at it, the assist numbers kind of fall off the floor, especially with even Ryan Rollins on the court, right? So Ryan Rollins has played in all these games, but Giannis is only averaging 3.5 assists per game so far this season with Kevin Porter Jr. Now, you're getting this 4.5 line. You're getting plus money on the under. I don't totally mind it. I'm hoping that this goes to maybe 5.5 when people look at what the history against the Warriors is. But Giannis tends to assist on the 3-point line. He's got a lot of driving kicks. That's something that the Warriors do a pretty good job of limiting. They want you to shoot these shots on the interior, like not in the restricted area. And those are basically not opportunities that Giannis is passing up. Those are ones where he's getting into the paint, he's driving, he's not generally passing into that area. He's creating the space in that area. So the concern is that, you've had some of these other big body guys like Scotty Barnes, Paolo, Julius Randle, all kind of crushing their assist prop. But I do think that the biggest swing here is those minutes with Kevin Porter Jr. have really changed the way that Giannis is attacking the basketball games and the way that he's passing and facilitating the rock. So the last game that we have on the slate is the Rockets versus the Blazers, and I am taking the uncomfortable position of fading Deni Avdija. There's a 27.5 out earlier in the a little bit earlier. I sent it out to my Discord. I grabbed the 26.5 here. I like the under for Deni on his points prop. Part of why I like this is he's obviously played really, really well over the past couple of games. 33 against Utah, 29 against San Antonio, 34 against the Pelicans. But this matchup against the Houston Rockets, a little bit different. Obviously, they don't have Şengün. Şengün, I think, is just like he's an okay defender. He's fine, right? But I think that that's not like the end of the world when you're looking at it from the Houston Rockets perspective and trying to guard Deni. One of the things about Deni and one of the things about the Rockets, right, is that the Rockets don't really allow looks at the rim. And that is something that Deni does. Like that's one of his strongest suits, is his ability to attack the rack and get to the rim. So here's the other problem though. When you look at this, if you looked at opponent points in the paint per game, Houston's right here. Houston's 11th. They're 48.5. Over the past 3, they're up to 50.7, but like whatever. They're pretty static on this number, right? The other thing is Deni sneakily is I think like 4th in the NBA in free throws per game. So more free throws than Jalen Brunson per game. I'll give you that. Opponent free throws attempted per game. Houston's in the top 10 fewest. They're 8th, 22.8. They're actually tied with Memphis. Memphis has 22.8 as well. So they don't really foul a lot. And I think that is pretty important here, because when we look at Deni's props here, if you look at even if you looked at just points in the paint allowed, right? And you said this is a challenging matchup. He's only averaging then 25.1 points per game. If we look at this even further, you look at pace and you said this is a challenging pace matchup. He's only gone over in one game, and that's against the Clippers. And I don't know, I'm not 100% sure who played or didn't play in that game for the Clippers, but either way, in these games where he's playing teams that don't allow looks in the paint and they play slow, he's only looking at a hit rate of 1 for 6, averaging 24.2 points per game. Even if we took that other part out, the biggest thing to me is the pace. He's played the Rockets now twice, or this will be the second time. And in the earlier game against the Rockets, 22 points, picked up 4 fouls, but he's gone under this line in 7 of 9 games, averaging 24.7 points per game. I think that this is a pretty good opportunity to maybe sell like a little bit high. These lines obviously were a little bit higher, but still against San Antonio was 26.5. And I think that this is a good opportunity to say this is a very dramatic swing in terms of the style of play that he's going from and the level of competitiveness that he's going from, because the games prior to these last 3 where he kind of eviscerated rougher teams in terms of the Pelicans, the Spurs, who've been playing fast. Their defense overall is like fine, right? And then the Jazz, outside of those 3 games, if you looked right before, 17 points against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And if you looked at some of these spots where it's like a little bit harder to maybe generate some of these free throws, he's still under this line in 5, or he's only hit this line in 5 of 13 games. And again, when you add in the pace, when you add in a couple more of these parameters, it becomes very difficult for Deni, I think, to generate offense in this particular game. So I like the under 26.5. I think it's a high line. If he goes over it, he goes over it. But I think that this is very tough for him, considering that the Rockets are good at the things that he does. They're good at not fouling. They don't allow a ton of free throws, and they're strong against spot up looks. I could totally see this being a situation too, where Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, you just have so many rangy guys to throw at him. Even Kevin Durant, long, lengthy player, solid, underrated defensively. And then you got Steven Adams kind of clogging up the paints. And they got Dorian Finney-Smith back as well. So I think this is a very tough matchup for Deni. And I'm going to fade him at under 26.5 points. All right, so that's the slate. Those are the best bets for today. I like a lot of these looks, honestly. I think it's going to be a pretty fun game. I hope the Knicks can get me a win today. That would be great. As for pods and recs, I am going to recommend getting a new pair of sneakers. I just got a new pair. It's like wild because I've like kind of hit the point in my life where I just keep buying the same thing, and I just like to wear it. And got this new pair of sneakers, super comfortable. Different colorway, so that was nice. Like I went from black to like dark blue and white, so that's nice. But super comfortable, super light. I like the On Cloud shoes, but my wife was like, you got to get like something different. Like you got to get at least a different version of them. So that's kind of what I did. And when I say I mean that's what she did for me. And super comfortable, highly recommend. I don't think you realize like when you wear shoes, like especially sneakers, like I'm like, I don't wear sneakers to work. So I'm like, I'm not spending a ton of money on sneakers. I think, you kind of forget, like, as you wear them over the course of like months, years, whatever, that, like just how worn down they get. And then you put on a new pair of shoes and you're like, wow, these are fucking awesome. So I'm going to recommend getting a new pair of shoes. Honestly, your feet are going to thank you. This is like one of the oldest things I could possibly be recommending. So really couldn't feel older today than I already do. So, enjoy your day, put on some good shoes, and let's continue to cash that.